Well, I'd say there's no zealot like a convert. And I didn't want a dog at all. In fact, I was quite adamant that I was a dog free person living a dog free life. And Benjamin, who is, of course, with me, who is
Hmm.
nursing the dog at the moment, Ben was having a particularly bad day at work. And Ben had been hassling me for some time. We just bought a house and he wanted a dog, desperately wanted a dog. And I had successfully fought this suggestion, but he was having a bad day at work and was, threatening to kill numerous people. And I was like, for Christ's sake, go across the road to the pet store that I know is across the road from your office and look at all the cute little puppies and calm down. You won't want to kill anybody if you look at a puppy. Anyway, half an hour later, I get a phone call that says, I've bought a dog. I was furious. I was like, what do you mean I've bought a dog? He went, he's perfect. He's a mini dachshund. He's adorable. He crawled into my pocket. And I was like, you can't buy a dog from a pet store. He was like, I'm rescuing him. I'm getting him out. Pet stores are terrible. I've bonded with this dog and I have to liberate him. He can't stay there a moment longer. I've bought a dog. And I was incensed, absolutely incensed. And sure enough, a couple of days later, this dog came home and I was so angry and I wouldn't look at it and I wouldn't touch it. I was calling my mother, threatening to leave Ben, and I felt displaced in my own home by this animal. But sure enough, a couple of days, even though he destroyed my shoes and ate one of my books and pissed on the carpet and did all the terrible, terrible puppy things that puppies do, something just switched inside me. And I was like, I love this animal more than anything in the whole world apart from Ben. And he belongs with me. He is my companion through life now.
Hello, I'm Mitchell Jordan, and you're listening to Love is a Doxy. In this episode, my old friend Van Badham, who you just heard, joins me with her partner Ben to talk about their dachshund Germanicus, who's resting on his owner's lap during our chat. But that's not a sign you'll fall asleep. Van's got some hilarious and heartwarming stories about growing up with a dog, being dumped over a dog, and a touching reminder of how dogs have healed both her and Ben. As you'll soon hear, this couple identify themselves as dachshund people. So, for consistency, that's the pronunciation I've used for this episode too. You might know Van from her articles in The Guardian or her award-winning plays. Maybe you've even caught her on TV calling out misogyny. But what you might not know is how she was able to turn a fear of dogs into a fierce love and devotion. I first met Van 18 years ago. At the time I was a teenager living on the sleepy south coast of New South Wales, the sort of place where nothing ever seemed to happen. Maybe that's part of its charm for some people, but I was deeply, deeply bored and restless. Van was a playwright and always on the move. If I had a crystal ball, I never could have imagined her owning a dog. But the reason for this, in fact, had nothing to do with her peripatetic existence.
I remember having a dog as a small child. My parents brought home a puppy who was a whippet called Jim when we were living in Canberra. And Jim was a phenomenal jumper and was able to jump like this 6-foot fence that we had at the back of our house. And he would run down to the oval, and my parents were constantly having to go and get Jim. But I loved that dog. But what happened was we moved to Sydney and we were temporarily staying with my grandmother, and Jim jumped the fence and killed a family's chickens. And this woman covered in chicken blood and feathers turned up on our doorstep screaming at my mother going, your dog has killed my chickens and I'm pregnant. And my mother went, that's not the dog's fault, which is probably not the way to handle that situation. But a decision was made that Jim had to go. And my parents promised me that he was going to a very loving family who would look after him. And all these years later, I'm not entirely convinced he wasn't sent off to the vet for a very long sleep.
As she aged, Van's fear of dogs was off the charts.
What happened was, as I grew older, I got very anti-dog. I was really quite averse to them and developed into a full-on phobia, to the point where if I was in a room with dogs or I knew dogs were nearby or I could hear dogs barking, I would absolutely wig out. Absolutely wig out. I didn't want to be near them. I thought they were going to eat my face. And it was, really impolite. I would be in my travels, staying with families who had dogs, and they'd have to put them in the shed, and the dogs would be sad, and I'd be sad, and all of this sort of nonsense.
This would prove challenging when Van was in a relationship with a man who had a very close bond with his staffy. But life is full of coincidences, and when she was working on a play about wild dogs, Van decided to confront her fear at last by visiting a dingo sanctuary as research for the theatre project.
So we went to this dingo sanctuary, and this was at the time that I was seeing this guy who had a dog. And I explained that I was personally terrified of dogs, blah, blah, blah. And somebody joked that what I probably needed was a bit of immersion therapy, and I should lock myself in the dingo enclosure and just sort of be in the most terrifying situation possible. So I did. So I was like, I will lock myself in this cage and face my greatest fear. And there's actually video on YouTube of me doing this, lying face down in a dingo enclosure with the dog sniffing me. And I thought I was going to die of a heart attack, Mitch. I'm not joking. After I got out of the cage, I was sort of, this is amazing. I'm not scared of them anymore. I'm okay. Like, I've faced my fear. I am no longer scared of dogs. And I came home, and there was a phone call from the guy I was seeing going, I think we really need to talk. And we broke up. So he was just a transitional object to the role of that guy in my life, was for me to stop being frightened of dogs. And then I met Ben, and Ben wanted a dog, and now here we are. So everything works out okay. Girls, listen to me. Everything works out okay.
As a writer, Van knew the whole ordeal made for a good story, which she sold to a real-life women's magazine for the princely fee of $200. But it was a story that ended happily ever after when Ben appeared in her life. Although he was having a bad day at work when he encountered Germanicus, he also knew that a dachshund would be good for Van too. And after a few weeks of stress, she started to experience their magic.
He's just impossible not to love Germanicus because he's very cute. Also, and I've done a lot of reading about dachshunds as well, that they are particularly attuned to the body language of adults. And being attuned means that they can read your emotions really closely, that they pick up when something is wrong, they know when you're sick, they know when you're tired, they know when you're happy. And just when I let the dog love me, which he really wanted to do, I just suddenly had this companion. Ben is sitting here with this massive smile on his face.
Yeah, I mean, he was in a litter, I guess, with a couple of others, but he was just so lovely. He was this tiny little thing, and when I picked him up, they made me wear gloves when I picked him up, and he really did crawl into my inside pocket of my jacket. And at that point, I knew that he had to come home with me. He was going to be our dog. And, Van had some resistance to the idea of having a dog and was a bit, well, where do I sit? Mind you, he was tiny, and he's still not big. I don't think he's a full mini.
We think he's half mini, half full-sized.
Yeah. I thought, here is an animal that is going to make our lives better. He's just going to want love, and he's going to give love. And it was funny for the first couple of weeks. It was a bit hard, it's hard with a puppy, people know that. And Van wasn't dead keen on having him.
Ben was working a full-time job in Melbourne and commuting from where we live, which is an hour out of Melbourne, and leaving me with this puppy that I did not want all day. I was so angry. And for the first few days, because I'm a writer and I'm used to being at home by myself and working in silence, we have a chicken run at the back of our house, and I had the dog in the chicken run, and he was screaming and crying, and I mean, this was before we dachshund proofed the backyard. Yeah. And so this was the only sort of secure part of the yard, screaming and crying, and I couldn't concentrate, and I was phoning my mother and complaining to my friends, and how could Ben do this to me?
And in the end, it was my mum, wasn't it, that you called my mum in abject frustration, and she said, you just have to let him love you, Van. And you did, and now he is part of our life. Like, he's just a lovely companion. He knows when we're sad, and I picked that up on the first day. I was having a really terrible day, and he got in my pocket. He wanted to make me feel better, And every day, really, that's what he's wanted to do. And if we try and deny him his job, which is to make us feel better, then he gets upset. If we let him love us, then he's perfectly happy and calm and engaged. So, I mean, he's a lovely colour. Like, he's a lovely brindle. He's in immaculate condition. The vets always say, "Oh, you must treat him really well." It's like, we just treat him like he's part of the family, you know.
And part of her giving in to these charms meant that she would get to name the dog who now lived in her home.
Germanicus is the father of Caligula, and he's one of the characters in I, Claudius. Like, he's from history. He was the Roman general who subdued the tribes of the Rhine. That is the conqueror of Germany, hence Germanicus. So he in I, Claudius, he's a very noble character, and he sort of meets a undeserved sticky end. But he's an inspiration for Claudius, who's his nephew, throughout the whole sort of story. And it's a name that I love, but is not a name I would necessarily give to a child. And when Ben said that he had got this dog, that he had acquired this dog, I said the condition on you bringing him home is that I get to name him, and I'm calling him Germanicus. And then I decided that I wanted him to be called Germanicus Ulysses, after Ulysses S. Grant, because Ben and I had just been rewatching the Ken Burns Civil War documentary. So he has this fancy Roman name, which is Germanicus Ulysses. And we've learned this with dachshund owners, that the majority of them give the dogs a long name, and that's the joke. They're long dogs with long names. So in our travels, we've met Napoleon, and we've met Pinocchio, and we've met Humphrey.
Bangers and Mash.
Bangers and Mash.
That was two dogs.
Yeah. There's a Schnitzel von Krumm, who I think is from some cartoon show, but people call their dogs Schnitzel von Krumm and things like that. And we get it. So Germanicus Ulysses. And when we're angry, it's Germanicus Ulysses, come in the house. And I think it's been good because, Ben and I are sort of at that age where there's a terrible risk of us being very middle class and potentially calling children something silly. But fortunately, we've channeled it all into the dog.
In an article for The Guardian, Van sung the praises of the Australian raven.
I love Australian ravens because they are rich with the symbolism of the raven. That's not just Western symbolism, but Western symbolism and Aboriginal symbolism as well. Ravens are usually psychopomps, which are animals that guide us, or spirit forms that guide us between the worlds, between life and death. We find them at the crossroads, and they make us less afraid of death because they traverse the territory between the living and the dead. I love them because they're hunters, and I love them because they're loud, and I love the sound that they make, and I can hear the sound of the Australian raven in my own accent, which makes me feel that I have a deep connection to them.
Just glance at its eyes, she wrote. The contrast to its dark feathers and mouth gives its face a startling Fang of Dracula, switchblade from the shadows of an alleyway quality. And although most people think of dachshunds as a sweet dog who you can cuddle up with, preferably wearing slippers in the shape of one, she also acknowledges there's something a little bit brutal running through this breed. Or at least Germanicus.
I love Germanicus because he's a killer. Like, that's part of the appeal. Like, he's a very kind and tender little dog who does look after us when we're sad, but he also will kill anything that tries to hurt us. So he's particularly protective of me. And it's very funny. Like, if we have somebody turning up to fix the dishwasher, or, like do any kind of household maintenance or deliver a package, Germ is like kind of thing, and won't let them near me, and gets, he has this amazing hearing, and is a great guard dog. Like, anything comes near the house, particularly at night, Germanicus is on it and he's making a fuss. He also very proudly kills rats and mice and rips their necks out in front of us to demonstrate what a good hunter he is. And people, of course, forget this about dachshunds, that even though they look so funny, they were bred to kill badgers.
It's no exaggeration that Germanicus's company changed both Van and Ben's lives.
Look, I think dogs are just good for your health, and especially, and Ben might want to talk about this. He had such a stressful job at the time that we got Germanicus, like just inhuman levels of pressure, and um, and I think that having a dog in our life has been really good for us to think
Absolutely.
about our stress levels and just a greater sense of wellness. Like I'm also very public about the fact that I suffer from a depressive disorder. And I did notice after we got Germanicus that the length and the severity of my depression was very lessened by having the dog around. I certainly didn't have the feelings of loneliness that used to accompany bouts of depression. There's actually quite a lot of research about the effects of dogs on mental health in particular, that there's something about the bond with your own dog. I mean, dogs are good. A dog in your life is good in general, but a dog that is yours that you have bonded with, they affect your tryptophan and your dopamine and your serotonin and like can alleviate these sort of chemical sadnesses and chemical tensions. But certainly, Ben, do you find that he's
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've since left that job, but while I was there, I think he really did create a grounding, because the reality is they only understand emotion, and they don't, and tone. So, you can't have an angry tone and be frustrated with a dog and expect the dog to understand. What the dog will understand is that you are angry, and it won't know why, and it does make you relax more. It does make you have to engage with a creature on its own terms. You can't verbally get to a position where it's changed its view or its understanding of the situation. And even just now, he's falling asleep in my arms as we're talking, and he's wriggled and he's squirmed and he's carried on. And I can say to him, "Oh, look, we're trying to do a podcast. Just settle down." He doesn't understand that. That's not his vocabulary. He's only got maybe 100 words or so, and he understands his name and food and walk, and now his ears are starting to prick up. But you have to engage emotionally much more with a dog than you necessarily have to do with people. So it does make you more emotionally attuned to the situation that you're in.
As a writer, particularly one whose work involves penning opinion pieces, it's inevitable that you face criticism. The internet is a toxic land where you can spew vile hatred anonymously and get away with it. Van knows what it's like to be trolled, but her dog helped her deal with this too.
Germanicus has given me a valve to sort of disconnect from the internet. I mean, I think the thing is, and especially when Ben, before the pandemic and when Ben was still working in his stressful job, Ben was out of the house for like 15, 16 hours a day sometimes, and would come home, sleep, and then get back up and go back to work, and was sometimes like getting trains at 5 o'clock in the morning and things like that. So I was, in the house by myself. And before we got Germanicus, like often I would turn to the internet for company, if Ben was doing particularly, or if Ben was interstate, that I would look for contact, casual contact by going online and getting into arguments. And, when you're sort of feeling isolated, the internet assumes this sort of disproportional influence in your life because it feels like society. And of course, once we got Germanicus and once Germanicus and I had bonded, that the internet didn't have that same sort of emotional hold on me anymore. I could literally go, actually, these people are kooks, and walk away and play with the dog. And I've learnt to respond to trolls by going, ha ha ha, I've got a cute puppy, ha ha ha, have a nice day, block, kind of thing, with photos of Germanicus. And he does that, like he's a perpetual connection. Ben actually said something really beautiful to me the other day where Ben was like, I got the dog partially because I didn't want you to be lonely. And it's true. Like they are the cure for loneliness. And the dog has made me feel much more a part of our local community as well. Because we moved here a few years ago. We didn't know anybody. Ben was obsessed with his job. I was like working, very competitive industry. And where we live, everybody's got a dog. And so we take Germanicus out for a walk. And of course, we meet Susie and Ethan and Flopsy and, Muggles and everybody else. And he's actually helped us to socialize within our community as well and develop relationships with other people. And that's very grounding when you compare that to the kind of nuttery on the internet. Although I will say, Mitch, that I got attacked on the internet the other day by a theoretically left-wing person, a person who needs to read more books if they want to consider themselves left-wing, who laid into me for having the dog and described me as like that bitch draped with her dachshund. And I just thought, mate, often I would let this go, but I'm writing down your name. I'm going to remember it. And you better know this. One day, you're not going to know where, you're not going to know when, but I'm going to get you for insulting my dog, let me tell you. I don't think I've ever been so angry.
You were very, very angry.
I was enraged.
And now, Germanicus assists by joining the two on their podcast, The Week on Wednesday. It's a news review podcast with a political focus, which Germanicus may well have developed through osmosis, given he's now fond of a protest himself.
Yeah, so Ben and I do a news review podcast every Wednesday, and it became very clear that the recording would go a lot more smoothly if we just had the dog with us, as opposed to lock him out of the shed, at which point he was bashing on the door and crying and sucking and pooing near the gate. He's a great one for a political poo, our Germanicus.
Oh, yeah,
if he thinks protest poo, if he thinks we've been out of the house too long, we'll come home and find a big steamy one on the deck. Like, he is quite manipulative in that way. So when we started doing this podcast, he was just so outraged that we would be separated from him that we've just had to work him into it. And so there will be Ben and I discussing it was funny the other day, like Ben was talking about the Morrison government's planned gas-led recovery and doing this amazing sort of economic analysis about why, investing in gas is like not sustainable economically and blah, blah, blah. And with the dog in his lap. And I just loved both of them with all my heart. Like, find yourself a man, Van, who can discuss, the intricacies of industry policy while holding a dog was quite a moment.
But what does a dachshund want most? What's top of the list if you want their vote?
Certainly they would be cuddles, red sweet potato, and boiled chicken are basically the demands from the dachshund constituency in our house. We also get what we call a protest picket. If Ben and I leave the house, because he's onto us, he knows that if we're changing our shoes or anything, that we're about to leave. And he splays on the ground with his belly up right in the doorway to try and prevent us from leaving.
Years ago, as Australians voted on whether or not they supported same-sex marriage, Germanicus hit the streets to encourage the public to vote yes. Ben's a big believer in the power of a dog to change even the most bigoted and conservative of minds. As he says, how can anyone say no to a dachshund? When the majority of Australians voted yes, Ben's mother was finally able to legally marry her partner. Now, Van and Ben are planning a wedding of their own, one which was delayed by COVID, but will include Germanicus when it does happen. For now, this couple is happy with the working from home life where the bed's been equipped with a ramp for Germanicus to get up and join them, and an ever-growing collection of dachshund accessories.
Yeah, he jumps off the bed, but he runs up the ramp to get on the bed. And it's just, if you're a dachshund owner, it's the ramp to the bed is just something that becomes part of your life. But we've played up to it, so we've got all the dachshund printed sheets and doona covers and things.
You're wearing a shirt with dachshunds.
No, I'm actually wearing a shirt with little dachshunds on it at the moment. And a friend of mine bought me a beautiful necklace that's got a dachshund, and it's like the whole house is just full of dachshund cushions and dachshund paintings, and we've become those people. Oh God.
I'm not sure about you, but that sounds like the sort of home I'd never want to leave. Love is a Doxy is created and written by Mitchell Jordan. All sound and song credits can be found in the episode notes. To get in touch or share your story, write to loveisadoxy@gmail.com.